Talk 360. Talk 360 for in-depth analysis on the week's news with Latif.
And this is 98.4 Capital FM. We are getting right into it. This is Talk 360 today. We want to review the 10th Parliament, whose tenure is about to expire tomorrow. And in the studio with me is a member who has been very vocal and very active in that parliament. He's Ekwe Ethuro, the MP for Turkana Central. He was also a member of the Speakers Panel. And I'm also joined by Atsango Chesoni, who is the Executive Director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. And she has advocated very many things up to this point, and we'll be talking about them as we go along this show today. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for coming today. Let's just get straight into it. Ekwe, your term comes to an end in just a matter of hours. Do you think the 10th Parliament did what you hoped would have been done by the time, by actually, let's say even by August?
Good afternoon, viewers. I'm glad to be a member of the 10th Parliament. I actually think we did better than we had anticipated, given that some changes took place in the course of the Parliament itself, the new standing orders, the new constitution in particular.
Well, how did the new standing orders affect the operations of Parliament?
Oh, they created substantially an opportunity for Parliament through the budget process to actually become a serious partner, not just a rubber stamp of the executive. It also brought the issue of live coverage. It also made the committee systems of Parliament extremely robust. And I think these are all instruments that I think previous parliaments lacked. And it also brought a new speaker who has been committed to reforming the parliamentary processes.
Atsango, do you believe that some of those things that Ekwe has just said contributed to making the 10th Parliament better than the previous parliaments?
I think the 10th Parliament could have done better in some respects. I think it was something of a mixed bag. Given the circumstances in which they came into office, I feel that at the beginning of their tenure, actually, I think they were very present and conscious of the circumstances of the country. But I think as things progressed, there was a level of relaxation that I don't think has been particularly useful for the country. They
fell back. There are very many instances, Ekwe, where in fact you were even a temporary speaker in many instances where you'd have no quorum in house. And we'd report here that Parliament has had to adjourn early this morning because of a quorum hitch, because what really causes such things? What is it?
I think even before I come to your quorum issue, I want to respond a bit to my colleague here, who happens to have been to be a good friend of mine also. I think that's a bit being unfair to the 10th Parliament. This Parliament has challenges that I think other parliaments have never had. As she correctly observes, that we came as a post-conflict Parliament. And I think we rose to that occasion in terms of once the agreement was made by the two principals, it took the intervention of Parliament to ratify it. This is a Parliament that has said the issue of ICC. There's no other Parliament that has been in that kind of situation. This is a Parliament that was also required to ensure that the Agenda 4 reform program is actually implemented. And more fundamentally, the issue of a new constitution, which I think all our parliaments, and even as a nation, for over 20 years, we were unable to do, and I think we managed to do it in this Parliament. So I think in that context, really, this Parliament deserves praise.
I think that's what actually she's saying. That in those initial days, let's say even the first year, the 10th Parliament seemed up to the task. And then towards the last 2 years, I think that's what Atsango was saying, the last 2 years, the 10th Parliament sort of seemed to have drawn back into just a house where you could not feel the enthusiasm of members of Parliament.
In fact, that is contrary. I think what is clouding your observations, both of you, is the fact that maybe towards the last 1 month, and for obvious reasons, on the 17th, there will be party primaries. So I think that, everybody needs job security. So you saw an empty house, and courtesy again of live coverage. I suppose if there was no live coverage, you would not have known whether it was an empty house. But I think more fundamentally, if you look at enactment of the Constitution on the August 27, 2010, we were on a roll. There was a time frame, there was a framework we had to pursue, and we have worked many times, extended the times of Parliament from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And this was not unusual that a couple of times we were actually there up to midnight. Yeah. So surely you cannot, to me, I want to look at it in that aspect. But if I come back to the quorum issue, I want you to appreciate that there are some legislatures, even one person and the speaker is sufficient, because you don't necessarily speak to your people. I mean, the people present. You speak to the issue at hand, and there is a record in the Hansard that's supposed to do so. Ideally, of course, it's good to have a few members so that they can interject, they can improve the debate and all that. But I think the issue of quorum has been exaggerated. You must also realize sometimes members call quorum, not because of they want to satisfy the numbers, because maybe the bill or the motion before the House they are not very comfortable with.
They feel that they need more time.
They feel they need more time.
It's a tactical.
It's a tactical thing most of the times, by the way.
Do you agree?
I do think that the job of legislators is to legislate and to discuss policies and think through them. And the purpose of having a diversity of people is so that we can benefit from that diversity of views. I think we're parliamentarians who tend to be very keen on that aspect of their work, and we see there regularly. The honourable member who's on my right is one of those. Having been a parliament watcher, I know that. So he's not one of the ones you can accuse of not being active on that front. But I do wish that some of his colleagues would be more active, because I think really, in all fairness, even if you have one very active member, you need some of these things to be ventilated. And really the number in terms of quorum is only 32 under the old
30.
and under the old
Out of
Constitution.
222.
So that's not asking for too much.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a great mathematician, but we're talking about a seventh. If you only look at the elected members, if you don't add in the nominated. And, once you add in the nominated members of parliament, really still, it's, so there's some people who we know are the usual suspects in terms of, I'm using it in a positive sense in this case, who we know you can count on to be there, and who will raise issues and will argue about them. And, it even for us as a country, we're then able to understand how they achieved, how they came to the conclusion.
What the thinking of Parliament was.
Exactly.
And some laws were passing.
Which is very important.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose. That's why we have the people's representatives there. So that our perspectives, because something might affect the people of Turkana in a very different way from the people of Westlands. And in turn, in a very different way from the people of Saboti or the people of Gishugu.
Yeah.
So it's actually important because, one of those places is in a concentrated urban area. Another one is in the part of, northern Kenya, which historically has been marginalized. Another one is in the midst of like an agricultural area. The implications of that policy are very different. So you shortchange your voter if there's consistent absence.
I'm sure you'd agree with that, Ekwe. One of the reasons, actually, let me just say there, one of the reasons why we thought of inviting Ekwe Ethuro into this show is because we knew the role that you've played in this parliament, and we've seen you, and we must acknowledge what is there to be acknowledged, that Ekwe Ethuro has been a very active member in this parliament. But you must know your colleagues, Ekwe, who have rarely participated in debates and discussions in Parliament. Maybe they talk in the corridors, but when they come onto the floor of the House, they hardly ever participate. You hardly ever, you would, maybe there's a member of Parliament who you'd meet whose position on some issue you have no clue about.
I don't want to agree on the number of issues he has raised. I agree on the need for more numbers to participate in debate and the business before the House. That one I agree. But I'm also saying that the fact that you may not raise the requisite numbers does not take away the issue of one of a few members debating. Definitely not one. We are quite a number who are consistently in the House. But you must also, why I am reluctant to accept that is also, I also know the role of an MP. The constitutional one is obvious, it's legislation, representation, and oversight. But there is another one, which I think parliaments now are becoming to appreciate, especially in the developing world, of what you call service delivery. Mm-hmm. So that the members of parliament, depending on their own personal persuasion and experience and background, who think that serving constituents is equally more important, and they can serve it by knocking on the offices of ministers, by going to the constituency and basically literally,
getting things done.
Get the things done. So that explains some of those absence from parliament.
You have a very diplomatic way of...
I'm about to say, I think you're being very diplomatic, and we'll leave you alone. We understand. I don't think it's fair to ask you to, but speaking from the perspective of the citizen and the voter, definitely we expect more from our legislators, and slightly, because we've seen people balancing. And I'm not gonna sound like we're favoring some of you. Yeah. We've seen some of you balancing all those various roles.
It has happened. You're on Talk 360 right here on 98.4 Capital FM. My name is Eric Latif, and this afternoon we are joined by Turkana Central MP Ekwe Ethuro, as well as Atsango Chesoni. She's the Executive Director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. We are discussing the 10th Parliament, sort of trying to see how we'd rate the 10th Parliament. You can join this discussion on social media as always. The hashtag on Twitter is Talk360. And on Facebook, join us on Capital FM Kenya, and on my Facebook page, Eric Latif. Also, today we are also live streaming on Hangout. You can hang out with us on Google Plus. Just join the Capital FM Kenya on Google Plus, and you will find us there. You can see this discussion live, and you can comment on it. Ekwe Ethuro, let's look at some of the issues that people have really felt sort of insulted by the 10th Parliament. One of them is what the president declined to assent to yesterday. This bill. And previously also the issue of MPs paying tax. MPs sort of arm twisting the finance minister to pay a tax on their behalf twice. What's your view on this?
I have very strong views on both issues. First, on the taxation. I got a contract at the last general election to come to parliament with certain expectations. And so for you to revise that contract midway was wrong to the employee. So we had to compensate for the tax liability that was going to erode the purchasing power of the contracted employee. You must remember that members of parliament are also employees working for the public, and as we have also rights as members of parliament. Mm. And I really want to speak to this one, because I have worked in another organization in my previous life where a scenario like that one arose, and the employer took the responsibility of covering the tax liability. But when it comes to parliament, everybody's up in arms, like we are mounting the government. We are not. So we are just demanding our rights like any other employee.
In your opinion, should
Yes.
MPs pay tax?
MPs will pay tax. That's what the constitution says.
Should they? Is it right for MPs to be made to pay tax?
But the way we pay tax, I want us to make that clarification. We pay tax on the basic pay.
Yep.
What we have not been paying tax was on the allowances.
Yep.
And we have a law that exempted MPs even before we came to parliament, 1974. Mm-hmm. So now the constitution came and demanded that the MPs should pay tax. And we are saying let the MPs pay tax because there is a new constitutional dispensation in the next parliament when it will apply.